Good day to all. Through this presentation, we will try to get a brief understanding of a section of Language and Linguistic paper of 5th Sem BA English. A brief overview of the syllabus to help all of you understand what we are dealing with. Language and Linguistics paper has got 4 modules to it. Module 1 is language, module 2 linguistics, which has 4 sections. Module 3 is phonetics, which has got sections from A to F, and module 4 we have got structure of English, which has got sections from A to D. The 4 sections of the 4th module are Introduction to Grammar, Grammar of Words, Word class or parts of speech, and the grammar of sentence. The syllabus demands practical exercise in all prescribed areas, needless to say. This presentation is intended to give you a brief introduction to grammar, which will help you understand why we learn all these and the need to excel in these areas as a student, as an undergraduate student of English language and literature. Have you heard anyone say that English grammar, or for that matter grammar, is their favorite area? Let's start with our general understanding on grammar. You must have commonly heard people say, or you yourself must have felt that English has a lot of grammar, but my mother tongue hardly has any. What blocks us from using English, which doesn't happen when we use our mother tongue? What is your image of a grammarian? Most probably, it is not a very pleasant one. Let's try the most common adjectives that would come to your mind when you think about a grammarian or grammar. You must be thinking about dull and boring and mechanical. I don't see an accepting smile on your face. Let's try to break all these conventions and try to be masters in our own ways in English grammar. Have you ever thought of the etymology of grammar? Where does the word grammar come from? Etymology means origin of a particular word. So, surprisingly, against all your expectations, it comes from the word glamour. So, no more hatred of grammar. It makes our grammar, or it makes a conversation glamorous. So, let's challenge our own understanding of grammar and fall in love with it. Before we attempt to define grammar, what is the difference between linguistics and grammar? Have you thought about this? Are they both the same? I think our answer must be no. Linguistics is a study of language in general, whereas grammar is the study of an individual language. So, linguistics deals with the general and grammar refers to a specific language and its study. Keeping that in mind, in simple terms, we may define grammar as a set of consciously learned and explicit set of rules and principles. Explicit means something that is clearly stated in detail, leaving no room for doubt or confusion. And maybe it is these 2 parts of the definition that takes away all glamour from grammar. One, it is consciously learned, and the second one, it is explicit. So then let's ask the question, aren't these rules there in your mother tongue? In Malayalam, Kannada, Hindi, for example? Then why is it that we never think of it though we use the language with all its functionality and fluency. Try to understand all languages have got grammar. The difference is in the way we learned or acquired them. When we try to acquire a foreign language, there is a conscious learning of its rules and regulations. But on the other hand, the principles of our mother tongue are unconsciously internalized. They come into play whenever we use the language. Now let's look at these 3 sentences carefully. Read each sentence and decide whether they are correct or incorrect. Sentence number 1. Why do the members of political parties sometimes behave like sheeps? Sentence number 2. My neighbor's daughter is 5, but they still haven't sent her to the school. Sentence number 3. He made us to realize our mistake. Now what I want you to do is look at these 3 sentences carefully and decide whether they are correct or incorrect. If you are very clear about the explicit rules of English grammar, you might have noticed minor errors in all the 3 sentences. Some of you may spot the error, but you may find it difficult to explain the reason. Now, let's look at the reasons why these sentences are considered incorrect. The first sentence, why do the members of political parties sometimes behave like sheeps, is wrong because of the usage sheeps. Now this is the rule explaining the reason. Some nouns do not undergo any change when a plural is formed. The plural for sheep is not sheeps, but it is sheep. Now look at the second sentence now. My neighbor's daughter is 5, but they still haven't sent her to the school. This sentence is incorrect because of the usage of the definite article. The rule is the definite article is not needed when it refers to the institution of school. But when you are referring to a specific institution, you have to add the. So if you remove the from this sentence turns out to be right. The third sentence is wrong because there is a verb made in this sentence which is the past tense of make. So he made us to realize our mistake is wrong because when a verb make is used in a sentence, it can only be followed by bare infinitive, not by the infinitive to. So the correct sentence must be he made us realize our mistake. Now based on this, like whether we can use the language or whether we can state the rules of a language, we can identify linguistic abilities into 2. One is the ability to use the language, and the second one is the ability to talk about the language or to use meta language about the language. So we are slowly moving away from the rigid definition we said earlier. We can give meanings to the word grammar as grammar A and grammar B, for example, or you can call it implicit linguistic ability and an explicit linguistic ability. What happens in our mother tongue, in the case of our mother tongue, is that we have implicit knowledge in our language and we only produce acceptable sentences, and we can figure out when an error is made in that sentence. But when it comes to explicit knowledge of a language, we can introspect about the sentences, we can explain the rules or processes involved, but we need not produce acceptable sentences all the time. And this is what I have I have explained the next two slides. If it is grammar A or when it is implicit grammar, you have internalized the rules. The rules are unconsciously in operation, which means you know the rules and they come to play automatically. Whenever your language is used, it comes into play automatically and we produce only acceptable sentences. This is implicit knowledge of grammar. Now you can compare this to the driving of a vehicle. When you start to take your driving lessons, you are confused about changing the gear if it is a manual vehicle. But as you become an expert in driving, your hand and your leg automatically gets to know when to apply the clutch and when to change the gear, because you identify it from the sound of the engine. This is when you have internalized the mechanism of the car. But when it comes to grammar B, this is called explicit grammar, where there is an explicit knowledge of rules. You can speak in a formal technical way about the language, but it is not necessary that it always come into play when you use the language. So let's ask a question here. Will all native speakers have this grammar B or explicit knowledge? Or if I rephrase the question, do you know all the rules of your native language if it is Malayalam or Hindi? Your answer must be no. So all native speakers of a language possess grammar A, which is the implicit grammar. They can use the language in an acceptable way and they can tell when it is used in an unacceptable way. On the other hand, native speakers of a language need not have grammar B or the explicit grammar. When we learn a foreign language, we are learning the explicit grammar or grammar B. It's good to know how or when the need for grammar really originated. What has happened to the definition of grammar in course of time? That is what I have tried to explain on this slide. If you look at all the languages of the world, we can understand that majority of the languages were spoken. As people became more interconnected and when writing started gaining importance, written language was standardized to allow broader communication. This was important to ensure that people from different parts of the world could understand each other. With spoken language having many forms, language purists, P-U-R-I-S-T-S, they started working to establish or to set rules for grammar of their times. But recently, grammarians or linguists have identified that speech and writing are different phenomena. So there has been a different approach to language study or an understanding that approves no rigid rules but studying the way the languages are used in different parts of the world. Now let's look at another example to make you understand this. There are two sets of sentences given on this slide. Study all these sentences to see if they are correct and if you would use them. The first sentence is, who do you want? Bindu is the girl I spoke to. My wife is taller than me. And the second set of sentences, the same sentences, I have put it in a different way. Whom do you want? Bindu is the girl to whom I spoke and my wife is taller than I. Just take 2 minutes to study all these sentences and see if they are acceptable or non-acceptable. Now, if you feel that, or you might say that sentences 2 and 3 are correct, like Bindu is the girl I spoke to, my wife is taller than me, and who do you want is wrong. And on the other side, you may say that my wife is taller than I is wrong. But we must understand that all these sentences are acceptable and you can hear them regularly used by native speakers. But remember, grammar books may reject them as wrong with reasons. For example, Bindu is the girl I spoke to may be considered wrong because, as per rule, it is wrong to end a sentence with a preposition. So, Bindu is the girl I spoke to. When to comes at the end, the grammar books might say that the sentence is wrong. But as per modern conventions, all these 6 sentences are acceptable. So, here I want you to move into what are the 2 positions that you see in the study of grammar, which seems to be an ongoing debate. The 2 positions taken by grammarians in this line are based on these sets of statements that I have given in these 2 boxes. One group of grammarians state that a given language should follow consistent rules, and they lay down rules for the use of language in a prescriptive manner, and all sentences that violate any of these rules are termed incorrect. I have used 3 words in red color because these are the key words that you must remember when you think about the first position of the debate. Any given language must have rules, they must be prescribed, and any sentence or any English that violates these rules must be considered incorrect. But there is another group of grammarians or linguists who see variation and adaptation as natural and a necessary part of language, and they record sentences as they are used systematically by a large number of speakers. These 2 schools can be termed prescriptivism and descriptivism respectively. So, prescriptivism means rules are prescribed, rules cannot be violated, whereas descriptivism allows variations and adaptations which are inevitable parts of language. Study this slide carefully and let's try to make things a bit more easier for you. On one side, I have put 4 laws: law of gravitation, law of planetary motion, law of migration, and water cycle. On the other side, we can see 4 rules in same color: traffic rules, KCB rules, KSR, and UPSC regulations. Can you state what is the difference that you notice between these 2 sets of rules? You can see that the first set of rules describe the phenomena found in nature, and on the contrary, the other ones, KSR, traffic rules, KSCB rules, UPSC rules, etc., are prescribed by the government, stating what we should do and what we shall be penalized if we disobeyed. So, which one sounds analogous to the prescribed grammar? Analogous means which one can you compare to prescriptive grammar? This side talks about natural phenomena and the other one talks about governmental rules. This is how we can describe the difference between descriptive grammar and prescriptive grammar. Prescriptive grammar is based on rules and descriptive grammar is based on actual usage. So, descriptive grammar see variations and adaptations as natural and necessary part of a language. Now, let's check our understanding once again. There are 4 statements given on this slide. You have to identify which among these statements look prescriptive to you and which ones look descriptive. Number 1, a preposition is always followed by a noun or pronoun which completes the phrase introduced by the preposition. Second statement, how can we accept compounds like vacuum cleaner and bathing pool? We can't clean vacuum and no pool can bathe. Third statement, that it is a solecism to begin a sentence with and is a faintly lingering superstition. The Oxford English Dictionary gives examples from the 10th to 19th century. The Bible is full of them. Fourth one, a preposition is not used after words like answer, approach, ask, attach, enter, etc. So the question is, which among these statements look prescriptive to you and which ones look descriptive? If you see carefully, you can see that some statements clearly states do this, don't do this. Whereas there are one or two statements which allows you a little bit of variation. So your answer must be statement number 3, which is based on actual usages. This is descriptive grammar. All the other 3 refers to prescriptive grammar. Now, summing up, you can study the diagram. Maybe it becomes self-explanatory this way. It is also important to understand that this division into prescriptive and descriptive is based on reasons of convenience. Most of the prescriptive rules are based on actual usage. Being learners of this foreign language, we will study the learner's grammar in the upcoming part of the syllabus to learn to use the language. The grammar we are going to learn in the syllabus is the end product or result of certain theoretical discussions which you will gradually get exposed to. So summing up, let's understand that studying grammar helps us understand the usage, and it may be looked upon through the lenses of grammaticality and acceptability. If rules and conventions make a sentence grammatically correct, a sentence becomes acceptable. When it agrees with its grammar, conveys meaning, and is appropriate to the context in which it is used, it becomes acceptable. So, moving away from the rigid rules we stated in the beginning, let's expand grammar as grammar of a language is the sum total of the patterns that constitute the structure of the language and the processes that yield the patterns. What is meant by a pattern? A pattern is the systematic arrangement of grammatical items. These patterns underlie actual instances of a language. And to make it really easy for you to understand, I have suggested a video here which is by Ted Ed, Does Grammar Matter? By Andrea Calicut. That will help you very clearly understand the transitions that have happened from prescriptive to descriptive grammar, and that will give you the language to write about it from an examination point of view as well. These materials I have taken from the PGCTE resources of FLU Hyderabad, which seems really handy and understandable to any learner. And I have also recommended 2 books for your reference. Please understand this is just a quick introduction to help your navigation easier and purposeful through the rest of the syllabus. Be inquisitive, keep practicing towards perfection. Remember, grammar is no more dull or mechanical or boring. It has a glamour in it. Thank you all. Stay home, stay safe.